Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 7 of our complete practice question series for the AZ-104 Microsoft Azure Administrator exam. Test your knowledge with exam-focused questions covering key Azure administration concepts. Choose your answer before the timer ends, then review the correct answer, clear explanation, and practical exam tip. Let us begin part 7. Question number 242. Now. The topic here is Azure Files Identity. An Azure storage account contains an Azure file share named Finance. A Microsoft Entra security group named Finance admins must be able to read, create, modify, and delete files in the share over SMB. The group must not receive permissions to manage the storage account. Which built-in Azure role should you assign to Finance admins at the file share scope? Choices. Option A, Storage File Data SMB Share Contributor. Option B, Storage File Data SMB Share Reader. Option C, Storage Account Contributor. Option D, Storage Blob Data Contributor. The best answer is option A, Storage File Data SMB Share Contributor. Here is the technical justification. Storage File Data SMB Share Contributor grants read, write, create, and delete access to Azure file share data over SMB without granting management plane control of the storage account. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. The reader role permits read-only SMB access. C. Storage account contributor manages the storage account but does not provide the required least privilege file data access. D. Storage blob data contributor applies to blob data, not Azure files. Remember this distinction for the exam. Azure Files data plane roles contain storage file data SMB share. Storage management roles do not automatically grant file data access. Let us work through question number 244. Begin by examining the scenario. A Microsoft Entra tenant contains a security group named Sales. All current and future members of Sales must automatically receive a Microsoft 365 E5 license. What should you do? Compare the following options. Choice A, assign the Microsoft 365 E5 license to the Sales group. Choice B, assign the license separately to each current group member. Choice C, assign the license administrator role to the Sales group. Choice D, add the Sales group to an administrative unit. The correct answer is option A, assign the Microsoft 365 E5 license to the Sales group. This is correct because group-based licensing automatically assigns the selected product license to current group members and processes future membership changes without per-user administration. B. Direct assignments do not automatically license future members. C. An administrative role grants management permissions and does not assign product licenses. D. Administrative units scope administrative management but do not provide licensing. Use group-based licensing when license assignment must follow group membership automatically. Proceed to question number 245. This question moves us into Azure DNS. Scenario. An Azure subscription contains 3 virtual networks and 4 virtual machines. VM1, 10.1.0.4, in VNet 1 hosts a custom DNS server. VM2 is in VNet 1. VM3 is in VNet 2. VM4 is in VNet 3. The IP address 10.1.0.4 is configured as the custom DNS server for VNet 1, VNet 2, and VNet 3. The virtual network address spaces do not overlap. What should you configure to ensure VM3 and VM4 can send DNS queries to VM1? Choice A, pure VNet 1 with VNet 2 and pure VNet 1 with VNet 3. Choice B. Add service endpoints to VNet 1. Choice C, configure a conditional forwarder on VM1. Choice D, create private endpoints in VNet 2 and VNet 3. In this case, select option A, pure VNet 1 with VNet 2 and pure VNet 1 with VNet 3. The requirement is satisfied because VM3 and VM4 require IP connectivity to the custom DNS server at 10.1.0.4. Pairing each client VNet with VNet1 provides the required private network path without overlapping address spaces. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. B. Service endpoints secure access to supported Azure PaaS services. C. A conditional forwarder controls how the DNS server resolves selected namespaces but does not create network connectivity. D. Private endpoints expose supported PaaS resources privately and do not connect clients to a DNS VM. A useful examination rule is this. Configuring a custom DNS server address does not create reachability. The client VNet still needs a route to the DNS server. Question number 246. Consider this scenario. An ARM template named mainTemplate.json is used to deploy a virtual machine. The parameters section defines location, type, string, default value, ESTIS, allowed values, Canada Central, ESTIS, West Europe, WESTIS. The variables section defines location, West Europe. The resources section explicitly defines type, Microsoft, compute/virtual machines, API version, September 1, 2023, name, variables, VM name, location, West Europe. You need to ensure the virtual machine is deployed to the West US location using mainTemplate.json. What should you do? Review the options. Option A. Modify the location property in the resources section to WESTIS. Option B. Select West US from the location parameter drop-down during template deployment. Option C. Modify the location variable in the variables section to WESTIS. Option D. Change the default value of the location parameter to WESTIS. The required response is option A. Modify the location property in the resources section to WESTIS. The location property in the resources section is hard-coded to West Europe. Even if parameters or variables are changed, the resource definition forces deployment to West Europe unless the resource declaration itself is updated. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because B. Parameter values are ignored because the resource location property is hard-coded. C. Variable value changes are ignored because the resource location property hardcodes West Europe. D. Default parameter values do not override hard-coded resource properties. The key takeaway is hard-coded resource properties in ARM templates override template parameters and variables during deployment. We will now analyze question number 247. Next, we enter the topic of ARM to bicep. Let us first review the situation. You have an ARM template named main.json. You need to convert it to bicep, correct any conversion issues, and deploy the resulting bicep file to resource group RG1. Which three actions should you perform in sequence? Move the appropriate actions to the answer area and arrange them in the correct order. Build the sequence from the following entries. Item 1. Run AZ deployment group create resource group RG1 template file main bicep. Item 2. Review main bicep and resolve decompilation warnings or errors. Item 3. Run AZ bicep decompile file main.json. Item 4. Create an Azure management group. Item 5. Assign a resource lock to RG1. Arrange the items in this order. First, run AZ bicep decompile file main.json. Second, review main bicep and resolve decompilation warnings or errors. Third, run AZ deployment group create resource group RG1 template file main bicep. The key reason is the decompile command creates main bicep from main.json. Because decompilation is best effort, you must review and correct the generated file before deploying it at resource group scope. Keep this examination point in mind. ARM to bicep decompilation is best effort. Always review the generated bicep before deployment. Review question number 248. Carefully. Review the scenario carefully. A hybrid Microsoft Entra ID tenant contains 3 user accounts. User 1, member account created in cloud-only Microsoft Entra ID. User 2, member account synchronized from local Windows Server Active Directory. User 3, guest account invited from an external Microsoft account. An administrator needs to modify the job title and usage location attributes for these users in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Select the option that completes each statement. Statement 1. The job title attribute can be directly edited in Microsoft Entra ID for the blank. Choose between User 1 and User 3 only, User 1 only, User 1 and User 2 only, or User 1, User 2, and User 3. Statement 2. The usage location attribute can be directly edited in Microsoft Entra ID for the blank. Choose between User 1, User 2, and User 3, User 1 only, User 1 and User 2 only, or User 1 and User 3 only. The answer to the first statement is User 1 and User 3 only. On-premises synced user profile attributes must be edited on-premises. The answer to the second statement is User 1, User 2, and User 3. Usage location is managed in Microsoft Entra ID for all users. Exam tip. Usage location is always managed in Microsoft Entra ID, even for users synchronized from Active Directory. Let us examine question number 249. The focus now shifts to VNet peering. Consider the following scenario. An Azure environment contains the following virtual networks: VNet 1, address space 10.11.0.0/16, region, West US; VNet 2, address space 10.11.0.0/17, region, West US; VNet 3, address space 10.10.0.0/22, region, East US; VNet 4, address space 192.168.16.0/22, region, North Europe. To which virtual networks can you establish a virtual network peering connection from VNet 1? Choose from the following options. Option A is VNet 3 and VNet 4 only. Option B is VNet 2 only. Option C is VNet 2 and VNet 3 only. Option D is VNet 2, VNet 3, and VNet 4. The appropriate choice is option A, VNet 3 and VNet 4 only. The reasoning is as follows. Virtual network peering cannot be created between virtual networks with overlapping address spaces. VNet 1, 10.11.0.0/16, overlaps with VNet 2, 10.11.0.0/17. VNet 3 and VNet 4 have non-overlapping address spaces and can peer with VNet 1 across regions, global VNet peering. The remaining options are incorrect because B, VNet 2 address space overlaps with VNet 1, making peering impossible. C, VNet 2 overlaps with VNet 1. D, VNet 2 overlaps with VNet 1 and cannot be peered. Remember this distinction for the exam. Virtual network peering strictly prohibits overlapping IP address ranges across peered VNets. Review question number 250. Carefully. Let us first review the situation. You have an Azure virtual machine named VM1 connected to Subnet 1 on a virtual network. NSG Subnet 1 is associated with Subnet 1 and contains default inbound security rules only. NSG VM1 is associated with the network interface of VM1 and contains a custom inbound rule with priority 100 allowing UDP port 3389 from any source to any destination. You need to allow incoming remote desktop (RDP) connections over TCP port 3389 from the internet to VM1. Proposed solution: you add an inbound rule to NSG Subnet 1 allowing TCP port 3389 from any source to any destination. You remove NSG VM1 from the network interface of VM1. Does this solution meet the goal? Evaluate each statement and select yes or no. Statement 1. Select yes if the solution meets the goal. Otherwise, select no. For the first statement, choose yes. Allowing TCP 3389 on NSG Subnet 1 without blocking NIC rules enables RDP access. Effective security rules evaluate both subnet and NIC NSGS. Traffic must be allowed by both levels. The next item is question number 252. Review the situation. An Azure virtual network named VNet 1 contains three subnets: Subnet 1, VM1, VM2 Subnet 2, VM3, VM4 Subnet 3, VM5, VM6. Each virtual machine uses a static private IP address. You need to configure network security groups, NSGS, to enforce the following access controls: allow web traffic, HTTP/HTTPS, from the Internet to VM3, VM4, VM5, and VM6. Allow all network traffic between VM1 and VM2. Allow remote desktop connections to VM1. Block all other incoming network traffic to VNet1. What is the minimum number of NSGS you must create to satisfy all requirements? Available choices. Choice A 1. Choice B 3. Choice C 4. Choice D 6. In this case, select option A1. Here is the technical justification. A single NSG can be associated with all three subnets. Rules can use specific source and destination IP prefixes to allow HTTP/HTTPS to VM3 through VM6, all traffic between VM1 and VM2, and RDP to VM1, followed by a higher priority deny rule for other inbound traffic. The alternatives can be eliminated because B, separate NSGS per subnet are unnecessary because one NSG can be associated with multiple subnets. C, for NSGS add no required capability. D, 6 per VM NSGS are unnecessary because rules can target individual private IP addresses. A useful examination rule is this. One NSG can be reused across multiple subnets, and its rules can target specific destination IP addresses. Let us examine question number 253. We are moving to external user management. Consider the following scenario. In a Microsoft Entra tenant, Admin 1 holds the user administrator role. When Admin 1 attempts to invite user 1 at Outlook.com as a B2B guest, the portal displays a generic authorization exception. What should you configure to ensure Admin 1 is permitted to invite external guest users? Review each available choice. Choice A, in external identities, update external collaboration settings. Choice B, register a new custom domain name. Choice C, add an external identity provider. Choice D, assign the security administrator role to Admin 1. The best answer is option A. In external identities, update external collaboration settings. This is correct because external collaboration settings control who in the tenant can invite B2B guest users. The guest invite setting must allow Admin 1's role or user category to send invitations. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. Custom domains do not control guest invitation permissions. C. Identity providers affect how external users authenticate, not whether Admin 1 may invite them. D. Security administrator is not the role used to resolve guest invitation restrictions. The key takeaway is guest invitation permissions are configured under Entra ID external identities external collaboration settings. Now consider question number 255. Virtual network VNet1 contains two subnets. Subnet 1, 10.10.1.0/24, has NSG1 associated. Subnet 2, 10.10.2.0/24, has no NSG associated. Virtual machines are deployed as follows. VM1, 10.10.1.5, on subnet 1 has NSG2 associated with its network interface. VM2, 10.10.2.5, on subnet 2. VM3, 10.10.2.6, on subnet 2. NSG rules are configured as follows. NSG1 inbound rule, priority 101 source, 10.10.2.0/24 destination, 10.10.1.0/24 port, TCP/1433 action, allow NSG2 inbound rule, priority 125 source, 10.10.2.5 destination, 10.10.1.5 port, TCP/1433 action, deny. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement is, VM2 can establish a TCP connection to port 1433 on VM1. The second statement is, VM1 can establish a TCP connection to port 1433 on VM2. The third statement is, VM2 can establish a TCP connection to port 1433 on VM3. Statement 1. The answer is no. The NIC level deny in NSG2 blocks the flow. Statement 2. The answer is yes. Default outbound VNet traffic is allowed and VM2 has no inbound NSG restriction. Statement 3. The answer is yes. Neither endpoint path has an NSG rule blocking the intra-VNet flow. Keep this examination point in mind. When both subnet and NIC NSGS apply to inbound traffic, both NSGS must allow the flow. Question number 256. Highlights an important distinction. The central scenario is as follows. An Azure subscription is shared across 4 departments. The subscription contains 10 resource groups, and each department utilizes resources spanning multiple resource groups. You need to produce a cost report in the Azure portal showing broken down cost details for each department. Which 3 actions should you perform in sequence? Move the appropriate actions to the answer area and arrange them in the correct order. Review the items to be ordered. The first available item is assign a department tag to each resource group. The second available item is open cost management and navigate to cost analysis. The third available item is group or filter the cost view by the department tag. The fourth available item is assign a tag to each individual resource inside the resource groups. The fifth available item is download the unformatted usage details CSV file. The correct sequence is as follows. In position 1, assign a tag to each individual resource inside the resource groups. In position 2, open cost management and navigate to cost analysis. In position 3, group or filter the cost view by the department tag. The requirement is satisfied because without cost management tag inheritance being enabled, resource group tags are not automatically applied to child resource usage records. Tagging the individual resources ensures their costs can be grouped by department in cost analysis. Exam tip. Resource group tags do not automatically appear on child resource cost records unless cost management tag inheritance is enabled. Apply precise reasoning to question number 257. This is an easy level challenge. Analyze the scenario before evaluating the choices. You use Azure CLI to deploy an Azure container app named App1 from an existing container image. Resource group RG1 and container apps environment env1 already exist. You plan to run the command AZ container app up with the required deployment parameters. Select the options that complete the command components. For the first statement, the Azure CLI executable is the blank. Select from AZ, Docker, or kubectl. For the second statement, the Azure Container Apps command group is the blank. Select from Container App, ACR, or Container. Statement 1 should be completed with AZ. Invokes Azure CLI. Statement 2 should be completed with Container App. Selects Azure Container Apps commands. Remember this distinction for the exam. Use AZ Container App up for a streamlined container apps deployment from an image or source code. Proceed to question number 258. Consider this scenario. An Azure environment includes virtual machines running Windows Server connected to VNet 1, VM1, private IP 10.1.0.4, public IP 52.186.85.63, OSDNS suffix, a datum.com VM2, private IP 10.1.0.5, public IP 13.92.168.13, OSDNS suffix. Contoso.com. You create a private Azure DNS zone named adatum.com and enable auto-registration for VNet 1. Select the option that describes the DNSA records registered automatically in the adatum.com private zone. Choose the correct entry for every drop-down field. The first statement reads, automatic a record registered for VM1, the blank. The available choices are private IP address only, none, public IP address only, or private IP address and public IP address. The second statement reads, automatic A record registered for VM2, the blank. The available choices are private IP address only, none, public IP address only, or private IP address and public IP address. The correct value for statement 1 is private IP address only. Auto-registration registers private IP addresses. The correct value for statement 2 is private IP address only. Auto-registration maps private IPs for all connected virtual machines regardless of guest OS DNS settings. Private Azure DNS auto-registration maps VM hostnames strictly to their private IP addresses. The next item is question number 259. Scenario. An Azure file sync group named Sync1 contains the following endpoints: Endpoint 1, Cloud Endpoint Endpoint 2, Server Endpoint Endpoint 3, Server Endpoint with Cloud tiering enabled. You upload File 1 directly to Endpoint 1 and create File 2 on Endpoint 2. After Azure File Sync detects the cloud change and synchronization completes, you verify the namespace on each endpoint. Select the option that indicates where each file is accessible. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate value. Review Statement 1. File 1 is accessible on the blank. The options for this statement are Endpoint 1, Endpoint 2, and Endpoint 3, Endpoint 1 only, Endpoint 3 only, or Endpoint 2 and Endpoint 3 only. Review Statement 2. File 2 is accessible on the blank. The options for this statement are Endpoint 1, Endpoint 2, and Endpoint 3, Endpoint 2 only, Endpoint 1 only, or Endpoint 2 and Endpoint 3 only. For Statement 1, select Endpoint 1, Endpoint 2, and Endpoint 3. The detected cloud change synchronizes to both server endpoints. For Statement 2, select Endpoint 1, Endpoint 2, and Endpoint 3. The server change synchronizes to the cloud endpoint and the other server endpoint. A useful examination rule is this. Direct changes to the Azure file share require cloud change detection before Azure File Sync propagates them to server endpoints. Let us work through question number 260. We are moving to VM resource moves. Begin by examining the scenario. An Azure subscription contains resources in two regions: VM1, Virtual Machine West US, connected to VNet 1, West US, VNet 2, Virtual Network East Asia. You need to establish direct network connectivity between VM1 and VNet 2. Proposed solution: you turn off VM1, create a new network interface in East Asia attached to VNet 2, and attach it to VM1. Does this solution meet the goal? For every statement, choose yes if it is correct, otherwise choose no. Review Statement 1, select yes if the solution meets the goal. Otherwise, select no. The answer to Statement 1 is no. NICs cannot connect across different regions. The key takeaway is virtual machines and their attached NICs/VNets must belong to the exact same Azure region. We will now analyze question number 261. Review the scenario carefully. An Azure subscription contains resources in two regions: VM1, Virtual Machine West US, connected to VNet 1, West US, VNet 2, Virtual Network East Asia. You need to establish direct network connectivity between VM1 and VNet 2. Proposed solution: you delete VM1, recreate VM1 in the East Asia region, create a new network interface attached to VNet 2, and connect VM1 to VNet 2. Does this solution meet the goal? Assess the following statements individually. The first statement is, select yes if the solution meets the goal. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1 should be marked yes. Creating the VM in East Asia permits direct VNet 2 NIC attachment. Keep this examination point in mind. To place a VM on a VNet in another region, the VM must be created in that target region. We will now analyze question number 262. Let us first review the situation. An Azure subscription contains resources in two regions, VM1, Virtual Machine West US, connected to VNet 1, West US, RG2, Resource Group East Asia VNet 2, Virtual Network East Asia. You need to establish direct network connectivity between VM1 and VNet 2. Proposed solution, you move VM1 to Resource Group RG2, create a new network interface attached to VNet 2, and connect it to VM1. Does this solution meet the goal? Determine whether each statement is true or false. Statement 1. Select yes if the solution meets the goal. Otherwise, select no. The answer to statement 1 is no. Moving resource groups does not alter the physical region of a VM. Exam tip. Resource group moves do not relocate the physical Azure region of resources. Let us examine question number 263. Begin by examining the scenario. An Azure subscription contains an application security group named ASG1, a virtual network VNet 1, Subnet 1, and VM1 connected via NIC1 to Subnet 1. You need to assign ASG1 to VM1. What should you do? Now examine the possible answers. Option A is associate NIC1 with ASG1. Option B is modify the properties of ASG1. Option C is modify the properties of Network Security Group NSG1. Option D is associate Subnet 1 with ASG1. The correct answer is option A, associate NIC1 with ASG1. Application security groups, ASGs, are configured directly on network interfaces, NICs, of virtual machines. Associating NIC1 with ASG1 applies the ASG grouping to VM1. B. ASGs are not assigned at the virtual network level. C. NSG properties do not assign ASGs to virtual machines directly. D. ASGs cannot be associated directly to subnets. Remember this distinction for the exam. Application security groups are configured at the network interface, NIC, layer. Review question number 264 carefully. Next, we enter the topic of virtual machines. Consider the following scenario. Azure Resource Health reports that degraded physical hardware affects virtual machine VM1. You need to move VM1 to a different physical host immediately. Proposed solution. In Azure Update Manager for VM1, you enable periodic assessment. Does this solution meet the goal? Determine whether each statement is true or false. Review statement 1. Select yes if the solution meets the goal. Otherwise, select no. For the first statement, choose no. Enabling periodic assessment does not relocate the VM, use redeploy. Use redeploy for host-related VM problems, use Azure Update Manager for guest OS patch assessment and installation. Let us work through question number 265. Review the scenario carefully. You have an Azure App Service web app named WebApp1. You need to configure a custom domain name www.contoso.com for WebApp1. What should you do first? Choose from the following options. Choice A. Create a DNS record with your domain provider. Choice B. Add an application connection string. Choice C. Upload a TLS/SSL certificate. Choice D. Stop WebApp1. The appropriate choice is option A. Create a DNS record with your domain provider. The key reason is before Azure App Service permits binding a custom domain, you must verify ownership by creating a DNS name or TXT/a record with your DNS domain provider. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. B. Connection strings are for database connections, not domain configuration. C. Certificates are uploaded after domain mapping is verified. D. App services do not need to be stopped to add custom domains. A useful examination rule is this. Custom domain verification in app service requires establishing name or TXT DNS records first. We will now analyze question number 267. Consider the following scenario. Subscription 1 has the following virtual CPU quota limits in West US: standard BS family vCPUs, 20 standard D family vCPUs, 20 total regional vCPUs, 20. The following virtual machines already exist in West US: VM1, standard_B2MS, 2 vCPUs, running VM2, standard_B16MS, 16 vCPUs, stopped, deallocated. Evaluate each proposed deployment independently against the current environment. For each statement, select yes if the deployment can succeed without exceeding either the VM family quota or the total regional virtual CPU quota. Otherwise, select no. The first statement is, you can deploy VM3 as standard_B2MS with 2 vCPUs. The second statement is, you can deploy VM4 as standard_D4S_V3 with 4 vCPUs. The third statement is, you can deploy VM5 as standard_B16MS with 16 vCPUs. Statement 1. The answer is yes. BS family and regional usage each reach, but do not exceed, 20. Statement 2. The answer is no. Total regional usage would become 22 vCPUs. Statement 3. The answer is no. BS family and total regional usage would each become 34 vCPUs. The key takeaway is stopped, deallocated, virtual machines still count against VM family and total regional virtual CPU quotas. The next key item is question number 268. This question moves us into resource groups. This scenario establishes the key requirement. An Azure subscription contains 3 resource groups: RG1, West Europe, Policy 1 assigned; RG2, North Europe, Policy 2 assigned; RG3, France Central, Policy 3 assigned. RG1 contains a web app named Web App 1 located in West Europe. An administrator moves Web App 1 from RG1 to RG2. What is the outcome of moving Web App 1 to RG2? The relevant choices are as follows. Option A. The app service plan for Web App 1 remains in West Europe. Policy 2 applies to Web App 1. Option B. The app service plan for Web App 1 moves to North Europe. Policy 2 applies to Web App 1. Option C. The app service plan for Web App 1 remains in West Europe. Policy 1 applies to Web App 1. Option D. The app service plan for Web App 1 moves to North Europe. Policy 1 applies to Web App 1. The required response is option A. The app service plan for Web App 1 remains in West Europe. Policy 2 applies to Web App 1. The reasoning is as follows. Moving an app service web app across resource groups changes its parent resource group, and inherits Policy 2 assigned to RG2, but does not relocate its underlying app service plan or physical region, West Europe. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because B. Moving a web app does not move its underlying app service plan location. C. Policy 1 no longer applies because Web App 1 moved out of RG1. D. Neither the region nor Policy 1 moves with the web app. Keep this examination point in mind. Moving resources across resource groups updates policy inheritance but does not alter resource location. Let us work through question number 269. Review the scenario carefully. Virtual machines VM1 and VM2 connect to Subnet 1 and Subnet 2 respectively on VNet 1 and possess public IP addresses. NSG1 is associated with Subnet 1 and uses default rules only. NSG2 is associated with the NIC of VM2 and contains default rules plus a custom rule with priority 100 allowing TCP port 3389 from any source to any destination. For each statement, select yes if the connection succeeds. Otherwise, select no. Review Statement 1. From the Internet, you can establish an RDP connection to VM1. Review Statement 2. From the Internet, you can establish an RDP connection to VM2. Review Statement 3. From VM1, you can establish an RDP connection to VM2. Statement 1 should be marked no. Default subnet 1 NSG rules block inbound internet access. Statement 2 should be marked yes. NSG2 explicit allow rule permits port 3389 inbound. Statement 3 should be marked yes. Default inter-VNet rules allow VNet internal connectivity. Exam tip. Default NSG rules allow all inter-VNet traffic but block all inbound traffic from the internet. Question number 270. The focus now shifts to container registry. You have an Azure container registry named Registry 1. A container image named App1 v1 is already built on your administrative workstation. You plan to tag the image with the registry login server and push it by using Docker. What should you do first? The options are: Option A, run AZ-ACR login name Registry 1. Option B, run Docker push for App1 v1. Option C, run AZ-ACR build for the local image. Option D, create an app service plan. In this case, select Option A, run AZ-ACR login name Registry 1. Here is the technical justification. Before using Docker to push an image to Azure Container Registry, authenticate the local Docker client to the registry by using AZ-ACR login. You can then tag the image with the registry login server and run Docker push. The remaining options are incorrect because B, the image must be authenticated and tagged for the registry before it can be pushed. C, AZ-ACR build performs a remote build from source context and is unnecessary for an already built local image. D, app service plans are unrelated to pushing images to ACR. Remember this distinction for the exam. For a locally built image, use AZ-ACR login, Docker tag, and Docker push. Use AZ-ACR build for a remote ACR build. Now consider question number 271. Review the situation. User 1 must upload a local folder recursively to an Azure Blob container by using AZ copy and Microsoft Entra authentication. The destination container already exists. In which order should you perform the required actions? Move the appropriate actions to the answer area and place them in the correct sequence. The available items are: Entry 1, run AZCopy copy with the local folder, container URL, and recursive equals true. Entry 2, assign user 1 the storage blob data contributor role at the container or storage account scope. Entry 3, run AZCopy login as user 1. Entry 4, regenerate a storage account access key. Entry 5, create a recovery services vault. The completed sequence is: the first item is assign user 1 the storage blob data contributor role at the container or storage account scope. The second item is run AZCopy login as user 1. The third item is run AZCopy copy with the local folder, container URL, and recursive equals true. This is correct because the user identity needs a blob data plane role that permits uploads. After the role assignment is available, AZCopy login authenticates the identity, and AZCopy copy performs the recursive transfer. Management plane contributor does not provide blob data access. AZ copy uploads with Entra ID require an appropriate storage blob data role. Let us examine question number 272. The focus now shifts to Azure Load Balancer. Let us first review the situation. A public Azure Load Balancer has the following addresses: 131.107.2.1, public frontend IP address 10.0.10.11, private IP address of backend VM 110.0.10.12, private IP address of backend VM 2168.63.129.16, Azure Platform Virtual IP address. Which IP address should a public DNS record use so internet clients can reach the load-balanced application? Now examine the possible answers. Option A is 131.107.2.1. Option B is 10.0.10.11. Option C is 10.0.10.12. Option D is 168.63.129.16. The required response is option A, 131.107.2.1. The requirement is satisfied because Internet clients connect to the public load balancer frontend. The public DNS record must therefore resolve to the public frontend IP address, which then distributes traffic to healthy backend instances according to the load balancing rule. The alternatives can be eliminated because B. VM1's private IP is not Internet routable. C. VM2's private IP is not Internet routable. D. 168.63.129.16 is an Azure Platform Virtual IP and is not the application's load balancer frontend. A useful examination rule is this. Public DNS for a public load balancer points to the frontend public IP, never directly to backend private IPs. Next, question number 273. Scenario. An Azure file sync group named Sync1 contains a cloud endpoint. The cloud endpoint contains file1.txt with a last modified time of 10 o'clock. Server 1 has share 1 containing file1.txt with different content and a last modified time of 11 o'clock, plus file2.txt. Server 2 has share 2 containing file3.txt. You add share 1 as a server endpoint and allow synchronization to complete. You then add share 2 as another server endpoint and allow synchronization to complete. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. The newer file1.txt from share 1 keeps the original name file1.txt in the synchronized namespace. Statement 2. The older cloud version overwrites file1.txt on server 1 without creating a conflict copy. Statement 3. Both versions of file1.txt become available on share 2, with one version stored as a conflict file. For the first statement, choose yes. The version with the later last write time retains the original name. For the second statement, choose no. Azure File Sync preserves the older version as a renamed conflict file. For the third statement, choose yes. The merged namespace synchronizes to the newly added server endpoint. The key takeaway is Azure File Sync conflict resolution keeps both versions, the newest keeps the original name and the older version is renamed. The next item is question number 275. Consider this scenario. An Azure Virtual Machine VM1 is located in West US and connected to VNet1, West US. You need to connect VM1 to VNet2 located in East Asia. Proposed solution, you create a new network interface in East Asia and attach it directly to VM1. Does this solution meet the goal? For every statement, choose yes if it is correct, otherwise choose no. Review statement 1, select yes if the solution meets the goal. Otherwise, select no. The answer to statement 1 is no. NICs cannot span across different regions to attach to virtual machines in other regions. Keep this examination point in mind. Network interfaces and virtual machines must reside in the exact same Azure region. Let us focus on question number 276. Focus on the following situation. A Microsoft Entra tenant contains a security group named Developers. You need to allow members of developers to create Azure Logic Apps in a resource group named Dev. Proposed solution, on subscription 1, you assign the Logic App Operator role to the developers group. Does this solution meet the goal? Evaluate each statement and select yes or no. Statement 1. Select yes if the solution meets the goal. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1 should be marked no. Logic App Operator lacks permission to create Logic App resources. Exam tip. Choose a role that includes the required resource creation actions and assign it at the narrowest practical scope. Proceed to question number 277. We are now working with Azure RBAC. Scenario. A Microsoft Entra tenant contains a security group named Developers. You need to allow members of developers to create Azure Logic Apps in a resource group named Dev. Proposed solution, on resource group Dev, you assign the contributor role to the developers group. Does this solution meet the goal? Assess the following statements individually. The first statement is, select yes if the solution meets the goal. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. The answer is yes. Contributor permits resource creation at the assigned resource group scope. Remember this distinction for the exam. Contributor can manage resources but cannot grant Azure RBAC access. Scope the assignment to the required resource group. Question number 279. You manage an Azure storage account named Store Alpha. AppWeb1 runs in Azure App Service and AppProc1 runs in Azure Container Instances. AppWeb1 uses a managed identity and requires ongoing read access to blob data without storing credentials. AppProc1 requires read-only access to one blob container for exactly 30 days. The storage account key must not be disclosed to AppProc1, and the delegated access must be revocable before expiry if necessary. Select the appropriate access mechanism for each application. Review each blank and choose the most appropriate option. The first statement reads, Access configuration for AppWeb1, the blank. Select from Access Control, IAM, Access Keys, Advanced Security, or Shared Access Signatures, SAS. The second statement reads, Access configuration for AppProc1, the blank. Select from Access Control, IAM, Access Keys, Advanced Security, or Shared Access Signatures, SAS. The correct value for Statement 1 is Access Control, IAM. Azure RBAC provides ongoing secret-free authorization to the managed identity. The correct value for Statement 2 is Shared Access Signatures, SAS. A service SAS can be limited to read access, set to expire after 30 days, and revoked through its stored access policy. Use Azure RBAC for persistent managed identity access. A user delegation SAS is limited to 7 days. Use an appropriately secured service SAS when a longer delegated window is required. Now consider question number 280. This question moves us into Azure Files. You maintain a storage account named FabricamStore that contains an Azure file share named ShareDocs. Drag each source item to the correct segment. Then combine the segments using the format // storage account angry face endpoint suffix / file share to form the Windows UNC path. The source items are as follows. Source 1, ShareDocs. Source 2, file.core.windows.net. Source 3, FabricamStore. The destination requirements are as follows. Target A, storage account segment. Target B, endpoint suffix segment. Target C, file share segment. Map ShareDocs to file share segment. Map file.core.windows.net to endpoint suffix segment. Map FabricamStore to storage account segment. An Azure file share uses the Windows UNC format // storage account name .file.core.windows.net / file share name. The storage account name, Azure Files endpoint suffix, and share name therefore map to the 3 path segments in that order. A useful examination rule is this. The standard Azure Files UNC path is // storage account name .file.core.windows.net / file share name. Question number 282. Review the situation. Your organization hosts a web application across 6 Azure virtual machines running Windows Server 2022. An Azure load balancer named LB internal distributes traffic across these virtual machines. Users report state loss when sequential requests are routed to different backend instances. You need to ensure that client requests from the same user are consistently handled by the same backend web server. What should you configure on the load balancing rule? Choice A, session persistence to client IP and protocol. Choice B, floating IP, direct server return, to enabled. Choice C, floating IP, direct server return, to disabled. Choice D, a custom TCP health probe on port 8080. The best answer is option A, session persistence to client IP and protocol. The key reason is configuring session persistence to client IP, 2-tuple, or client IP and protocol, 3-tuple, routes successive requests from the same client IP address to the same backend virtual machine, preserving session state. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. Floating IP enables direct server return for SQL always on availability groups and does not enforce client sticky sessions. C. Disabling floating IP is the default state and does not handle session persistence. D. Health probes monitor node viability, not client request routing stickiness. The key takeaway is to bind client traffic to a specific backend VM instance in Azure Load Balancer. Configure session persistence. Question number 285. The difficulty level here is medium. Review the situation. An Azure subscription contains the following resource groups and recovery services: Vault, RGA, East US, containing Vault East, Recovery Services Vault, RGB, Central US. The subscription includes 6 virtual machines configured as follows: VM1, RGA, East US, Windows Server 2022 VM2, RGA, Central US, Windows Server 2022 VM3, RGB, East US, Windows Server 2022 VM4, RGA, East US, Ubuntu Linux 22.04 VM5, RGA, Central US, Ubuntu Linux 22.04 VM6, RGB, East US, Ubuntu Linux 22.04 U. Plan to protect as many virtual machines as possible using Vault East. Which virtual machines can be backed up to Vault East? The options are: Option A, VM1, VM3, VM4, and VM6 only. Option B, VM1 and VM4 only. Option C, VM1, VM2, VM3, VM4, VM5, and VM6. Option D, VM3 and VM6 only. The correct answer is option A, VM1, VM3, VM4, and VM6 only. The reasoning is as follows. An Azure Recovery Services Vault can back up Azure virtual machines residing in any resource group, provided the virtual machines are in the same Azure region as the Vault. Vault East is in East US, so it can back up VM1, VM3, VM4, and VM6, all in East US. B. Excludes VM3 and VM6, which are in East US and fully supported regardless of resource group. C. Includes VM2 and VM5, which reside in Central US and cannot be protected by an East US vault. D. Excludes VM1 and VM4 in RGA. Keep this examination point in mind. A Recovery Services Vault can protect virtual machines in different resource groups, but the protected VM and vault must be in the same Azure region. Review question number 286. Carefully. Begin by examining the scenario. You manage an Azure container app named App1. App1 uses an HTTP scaling rule. You must ensure that App1 always runs at least 2 replicas and never scales beyond 20 replicas. Which 2 scaling settings should you configure? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Choose the best 2 responses. Compare the following options. Choice A, set the minimum number of replicas to 2. Choice B, set the maximum number of replicas to 20. Choice C, set the revision mode to multiple. Choice D, set the ingress transport to TCP. Choice E, set the environment workload profile minimum node count to 2. The required selections are option A, set the minimum number of replicas to 2, and option B, set the maximum number of replicas to 20. Here is the technical justification. The minimum replica setting establishes the lower bound for active app replicas, and the maximum replica setting caps scale out. Setting them to 2 and 20 satisfies both requirements, while the HTTP rule determines the desired replica count within those bounds. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. C. Revision mode controls how revisions receive traffic, not replica limits. D. Ingress transport selects HTTP or TCP handling and does not define scaling bounds. E. Workload profile node limits apply to environment infrastructure capacity, not directly to App1's replica minimum. Exam tip. In Azure Container Apps, scale rules determine demand while min replicas and max replicas enforce the app level lower and upper replica bounds. Proceed to question number 287. This is marked as a medium question. Consider this scenario. You have a recovery services vault named Vault Test that was used during a proof of concept project. Vault Test contains backup data for 2 protected virtual machines. You need to delete Vault Test from your subscription. What should you do first? Review the options. Choice A. From Vault Test, stop protection and delete the backup data for each item. Choice B. Modify the diagnostic log settings on the virtual machines. Choice C. Modify the resource locks on the virtual machines. Choice D. Dissociate the virtual network interface cards of the virtual machines. The appropriate choice is option A. From Vault Test, stop protection and delete the backup data for each item. This is correct because before an Azure Recovery Services vault can be deleted, you must first stop protection and delete all existing backup data/items registered inside the vault. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because B. Disaster recovery settings do not prevent vault deletion if backup items exist. C. Resource locks on virtual machines do not block vault deletion unless a lock is explicitly placed on the vault itself. D. Disconnecting VMNICs does not delete protected backup data items within the vault. Remember this distinction for the exam. To delete a recovery services vault, you must first remove all protected items, soft deleted items, and backup infrastructure dependencies. The next item is question number 288. Scenario. Your company has an Azure subscription containing 12 virtual networks residing in separate resource groups. To comply with internal security regulations, any network security group, NSG, created in the subscription must contain a rule that blocks TCP port 8080 traffic between virtual networks. Solution: you create a custom Azure policy definition that enforces the required NSG rule structure, and then assign the policy definition to the subscription scope. Does this meet the goal? Available choices. Option A. Yes. Option B. No. The appropriate choice is option A. Yes. The requirement is satisfied because Azure policy definitions assigned at the subscription scope evaluate resource configurations and can enforce compliance, deny non-compliant NSG creation, or automatically deploy required rules using deploy if not exists. The remaining options are incorrect because B. Incorrect because assigning a custom Azure policy definition to the subscription is an effective mechanism to govern and enforce standard NSG security rules across all contained virtual networks. Use Azure policy to enforce configuration standards, such as required network security rules, across multiple resource groups in a subscription. Now consider question number 289. We are moving to resource groups. You have an Azure subscription containing a resource group named RG Production. Resources in RG Production were deployed over time using automated ARM templates. You need to view the historical date and time when specific resource deployment operations took place in RG Production. Solution: from the subscriptions blade, you select the subscription, and then open the resource provider's setting. Does this meet the goal? Review the options. Option A. Yes. Option B. No. In this case, select option B. No. The resource provider's blade shows namespace registration status for a subscription. To view timestamps and details of historical template deployments in a resource group, you inspect the deployments blade or activity log of the resource group. The alternatives can be eliminated because A. Resource providers do not track historical deployment timestamps or resource creation dates. A useful examination rule is this. To audit when resources were created or modified in a resource group, check the activity log or deployments history. Now consider question number 290. Scenario. You manage a multi-tier Azure workload with a public web tier, an internal business logic tier, and an internal database tier. You need to distribute private traffic from the web tier across the business logic virtual machines. You must also protect HTTP and HTTPS requests to the web tier from SQL injection and other common web exploits. Select the appropriate Azure resource for each requirement. Select the value that correctly completes each statement. Statement 1. Balance private traffic across the business logic virtual machines, the blank. The options for this statement are an application gateway standard _v2, an application gateway WAF _v2, an internal standard load balancer, a network security group, NSG, or a public standard load balancer. Statement 2. Protect the web tier from common web application attacks, the blank. The options for this statement are an application gateway standard _v2, an application gateway WAF _v2, an internal standard load balancer, a network security group, NSG, or a public standard load balancer. For statement 1, select an internal standard load balancer. It exposes a private frontend and balances TCP or UDP traffic across internal backend virtual machines. For statement 2, select an application gateway WAF _v2. WAF _v2 inspects HTTP and HTTPS traffic and applies managed web attack rules. The key takeaway is use load balancer for layer 4 distribution and application gateway WAF _v2 for layer 7 routing plus web application firewall protection. You have completed part 7 of the AZ-104 Microsoft Azure Administrator Exam Practice Series. Keep building your Azure administration skills by opening the complete playlist and continuing with the remaining parts in sequence. If this session helped your preparation, like the video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more certification exam practice content. Share your score, doubts, or feedback in the comments. I would be happy to hear how your preparation is going. Thank you for learning with Tech with Kaushik. Keep practicing, and I will see you in the next part.